Today we're looking at Tools of Titans, the tactics, routines, and habits of billionaires, icons, and world-class performers. And this book has changed my life in a revelatory number of ways. I'm so excited to share some of these great ideas with you guys. Number 1, Morgan Spurlock of Super Size Me says, "You can't be afraid to show your scars. That's who you are. Stay true to that." But side note, this was the same reason Freud didn't like to write about his life. Isn't that interesting? Number 2, Seth Godin says he learned from chef Chris Schlesinger that when you're cooking, you should taste the food as you go. I've never been much of a chef, but I started doing this. It's made cooking so much more fun, but you gotta sneak the food and don't get caught. Number 3, Seth also says that the way to teach your kids to solve interesting problems is to give them interesting problems to solve, like the Rubik's Cube, and then don't criticize them when they fail. Don't criticize them for that. He spends a lot of time with kids and listening to what they have to say and whether they actually have something to say. You know how some kids have nothing to say? Number 4, James Altucher, author of The Power of No, recommends the habit of writing down 10 ideas each morning to develop your idea muscle. 10 ideas as soon as you wake up, okay? And if you can't come up with 10, come up with 20. Perfectionism is the enemy of the idea muscle, he says. Number 5, losers have goals, winners have systems, says Scott Adams. And I think about this a lot. I'm always trying to create systems in my life. You know, part of the reason that I get so much reading done is I just take the bus or the subway. You know, something that's gonna force me to read. I'm reminded of people who have deadlines, or like the guys in South Park. The guys in South Park have to have an episode or a video out by the next week. Beethoven would be composing right as they were still going on, right beforehand. I hope you guys like to sight read. And same with Mozart, he'd be out there with his violin. Number 6, affirmations. Scott Adams says you should pick a goal and write it down 15 times a day in some specific form, like I, Scott Adams, will become an astronaut, for example. And then you do that every day. He says this will make it seem as if the universe just starts spitting up opportunities and that it may look like there are coincidences. And then he says, well, whether or not they are is less relevant than the fact that they seem to pop up. Number 7, Dan Carlin at Hardcore History. Have you seen that podcast? Make sure you get this podcast on iTunes, Hardcore History. He says, don't be afraid to do something you're not qualified to do. That's the ultimate mantra to live by. You know, whether you're making movies or making music, none of these guys are qualified. The guys who created Facebook were not qualified to make Facebook, okay? They just wanted to make some Match.com site. They were just trying to get girls. Number 8, if you have a podcast or a YouTube channel or a blog, shoot for 1,000 fans, okay? 1,000 super fans, that's all you need, okay? And just so you know, I'm probably one of your fans right now, so all you need is 999 more. Number 9, Ed Catmull, co-founder of Pixar, says you should start with suck, and their films to begin with, they do. The final film bears no relationship to what they start off with. In other words, the first version of the movie always sucks, just like the first version of Star Wars sucked before John Williams came along. Number 10, Damon John at Shark Tank says, 5 days a week, I read my goals before I go to sleep and when I wake up. There are 10 goals around health, family, business, etc. with expiration dates, and I update them every 6 months. Number 11, you should invest in the best router you can, because this is going to save you time in the long run, says Noah Kagan, the number 30 employee at Facebook. He currently uses the Asus RT AC87U wireless AC2400 dual band gigabit router. It does save you time. Netflix is in 4K now. That is not a joke, all right? Those guys at Best Buy are not just trying to sell you a TV. Noah says he turns off his Wi-Fi when he has blocked out time for creating things or for writing. Number 12, NutriBullet. Noah also likes this better than the Vitamix, which is hard to believe. We have a Vitamix, so expensive. And so I didn't want to get to NutriBullet, but he talks so highly about it, and we went and got it with my wife, and we like it so much I got one for her too. It's great, especially if you're on the run. There's no cleaning. There's something about having the cup right there. Number 13, Neil Strauss recommends the Freedom app. It'll lock you off the internet for as many minutes as you specify so you don't get caught in the clickbait hole. It's interesting that we have to have a Freedom app now. This is the point that it's gotten to. If you set your goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. James Cameron. If you find yourself in a fair fight, you didn't plan your mission properly. It's so true. Those are 2 quotes that start out the best book of the year so far with Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. Let's get started. Number 1, Chris Sacca from Shark Tank, he's also a super investor, says that if you're in a startup, go to all the meetings that you can, even if you're not invited to them. If people wonder why you're just there, start taking notes. I'll be taking notes for you. They like that. It's a good way to get in. He also says to be weird. Weird is why we adore our friends. I mean, look at those shirts he wears. He wears those cowboy shirts, and me, I'm totally weird. I'm into VR, virtual reality and float tanks, which is weird, scary, bizarre. Bizarre is a scary word, but embrace it. Weirdness is what sets us apart and gets us hired, Saka says. Number 3, Neil Gabler's biography of Walt Disney. Read it, says Mark Andreessen. Arnold Schwarzenegger said, I wasn't there to compete, I was there to win. He would also say to his competitors, did you hurt your knee? Because it would throw them off. It would throw off the other bodybuilders. Did you take any salty foods lately? Because it looks like your water retention. And it would throw them off. They'd be looking at themselves in the mirror. Arnold also meditates on his biceps when he lifts weights. And he gets into the muscle. He becomes one with the muscle. One of Tim's favorite negotiating maxims is, he who cares the least wins. Derek Siever, the creator of CD Baby, says, when you make a business, you're making a little world where you control the laws. It doesn't matter how things are done everywhere else. In your little world, you can make it like it should be. By the way, have you seen Google Earth on HTC Vive yet? Speaking of little worlds. I like this quote by Matt Mullenweg. Everyone is interesting. If you're ever bored in a conversation, the problem's with you, not the other person. Just let that one sit in. Matt's also a fan of the book How Proust Can Change Your Life by Alain de Botton. I dated someone who was totally into Proust. I still don't know who he is. Number 8, check out the Yard Aromatherapy Diffuser, which Nicholas McCarthy uses every day. He likes geranium oil. Tim Ferriss agrees and says after dabbing a bit on his wrists and rubbing it on his arms, he actually feels more stamina. He then purchased an Inogear 200 milliliter aromatherapy diffuser in wood grain. And I'm going to get one of those too. I'm really into smells, candles, but not like Jan on The Office. I didn't survive, I prepared, was Nelson Mandela's answer when Tony Robbins asked him, Sir, how did you survive all those years in prison? I didn't survive, I prepared. Tony has so many quotes. He reminds me of Benjamin Franklin. Here are 3 cool quotes of his in the book. It's sort of like short but sweet. Stressed is the achiever word for fear. Losers react, leaders anticipate. What you know doesn't mean shit. What do you do consistently? Warren Buffett told Tony Robbins, investing in yourself is the most important investment you'll ever make in your life. Right? So maybe you should do that. Go to that photography school. Go learn Pro Tools. If you ever feel really bad or having a hard day, watch Little Dieter Needs to Fly by Werner Herzog. It's Casey Neistat's favorite movie. Casey also gets up at 4:30 every morning to make his YouTube videos, or at least he did. Kanye West has a giant poster of himself right inside the living room because he says, well, I gotta cheer for me before anyone else could cheer for me. So maybe you should make a giant poster of yourself and put it in the living room, invite all your friends over and see what they say. Never go to sleep without a request to your subconscious. Thomas Edison. You realize that we're walking around systems in society, and much of what consumes most of our days is not some natural order, says B.J. Miller, commenting on the end of life and life itself. Maria Popova at brainpickings.org often reads a book a day, and in so doing, knows how to live a good life. She shares with Tim how famed neurologist and writer Oliver Sacks used to put a piece of paper on the wall by his desk that simply said in all caps, no, with an exclamation point. It was to remind himself to decline invitations that took away from his writing time. I think that is the best idea ever. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go get a marker. I'm going to put a big no. I'm going to start writing no all over my walls. And I'm going to point at the no if anybody tries to come say hi to me. Number 2. Tim then asked Maria, what is the worst advice you see or hear given in your trade or expertise? Upon which he answered, follow your dreams. It's impossible to do without self-knowledge, which takes years. You discover your dream or sense of purpose in the very act of walking the path, which is guided by equal parts choice and chance. Number 3, Jocko Willink is described by Tim Ferriss as one of the scariest human beings imaginable. He spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy and commanded SEAL Team 3's Task Unit Bruiser, the most highly decorated special operations unit from the Iraq War, and you should read his book, Extreme Ownership. It's excellent. Tim asks a lot of stock questions that get great answers, and in this case, he asked, what would you put on a billboard? Jocko responded, my mantra is a very simple one, and that's discipline equals freedom. He also says, if you want to be tougher mentally, it is simple. Be tougher. Don't meditate on it. I'm reminded of Wim Hof and the Seal, who lived with Jesse Itzler. Did you read Living with a Seal? You should really get that book. We learned from these guys that the cold water isn't cold, it's hot. You make the cold water hot in your mind. When you go outside, that weather doesn't suck. It's great. It's nice, hot Hawaii weather. If you're going through a tough situation, Jocko says that detaching yourself from the situation so you can see what's happening is absolutely critical. He says, sounds horrible, but it's almost like sometimes I'm not a participant in my own life. I'm an observer of that guy who's doing it. Being able to detach as a leader is critical. Number 5, Sebastian Junger is the co-director of Restrepo about the Platoon documentary of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan's Karangal Valley. Tim asked him a great question. How do you become a man in a world that doesn't require courage? Upon which he said, well, in terms of our communities and our society at home, we thankfully no longer have to organize young men and prepare them for group violence so they can survive. I mean, that's been the norm for 2 million years, either from predators or from other humans. And if you don't give young men a good and useful group to belong to, they will create a bad group to belong to. But one way or another, they're going to create a group and they're going to find something, an adversary, where they can demonstrate their prowess and their unity. Number 6, Sebastian says disasters and crises like 9/11 or the World War II bombings in London often results in dramatic decreases in suicide, violent crime, mental illness, symptoms, etc. And he says that feeling of us buffers many people from their psychological demons. Number 7, for you world travelers, it's good for us to know that organized crime is now targeting airline passengers, which is good to know because my dad is now going on an airline. Great. They Google each name, create a list of apparent high-value targets, and arrive early to look for the right name on limo driver signs, and then they threaten the actual limo drivers, who are then replaced. Tim, while talking to Mark Goodman, who heads the Future Crimes Institute, says that he uses Uber or pseudonyms for any car service pickups around the world. By using a made-up name for your car reservation, if you see a placard with your real name on it, then you know it's a setup, okay? So don't use your real name. Use your made-up name that you create, like Mr. Fox. This is not paranoia. This is the world we're living in now. Even if you're a success on the internet or something, I mean, you don't have to be a politician to be targeted, okay, Dad? Would you just listen to me for once? Number 8, I'm not single, but I'd want to know this if I was, so Sammy Kamkar is this great hacker, and he became really good at online dating. He was good at this because he could optimize the code and crunch data. Anyway, in his data crunching, he learned that shirtless pics and animals, like on Tinder, were like crack. Tim didn't believe him, so they tested it. He took off his shirt and he posed with a kitty, and apparently it works. Women like kitties. What if the women showed up for the date and you were still shirtless with a kitty? Hey, I thought this is what you ordered. This is who I am, 24/7. I don't have an off switch, okay? Today we're looking at more great ideas from Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. It's so good that I'm doing a series on the book. It just came out and people are going crazy for it. So with that said, let's keep it going with our top ideas for today. Number 1, the Jar of Awesome. Tim's ex-girlfriend, who he calls a real sweetheart, made him and gave him as a gift the Jar of Awesome. It's a mason jar, and he has glitter on the side where it actually says mason jar. Anyway, anytime something really cool happens in a day, something that makes him excited or joyful, doctor's orders are to write it down on a slip of paper and put it in this mason jar. That is, when something great happens, you think you'll remember it 3 months later, but you won't. The Jar of Awesome creates a record of great things that actually happen, he says, all of which are easy to forget if you're depressed or seeing the world through great colored glasses. You know, like in February or March? Tim says that his 20-year-old self would vomit using the Jar of Awesome, but now he knows it works, and so you want to keep it where you can see it constantly? And the more serious you are in life, the more ridiculous you should make this jar, he says. Who are you trying to impress? I totally agree with this. Try it and put something in there, and if you can't think of anything, you can say, I didn't die today. Number 2, Josh Waitzkin wrote the book The Art of Learning, which is one of the best books I've ever read. He's also a chess and jiu-jitsu champion, and he says he cultivates empty space as a way of life for the creative process. This means he avoids nearly all meetings and phone calls, and he doesn't do interviews, doesn't do social media, sounds like George Lucas, and you're not going to find him on Facebook. And what do you think about this? I do Facebook, and then I literally quit it. It's like my life is just going better if I don't have that that in my life, so thank you, Josh, for reminding me to quit Facebook and that it's a complete crap fest. Waste of time. Number 3. For you chess guys, Josh teaches you to begin with the end game. For example, when he's teaching you, he doesn't start with opening moves. Instead, he gives you 3 pieces, a king and pawn against a king. So just play with this and learn how these 3 pieces play against each other. This is called learning the macro from the micro. You can memorize these openings later, but by only having a few simple pieces, you can learn the beauty of high-level concepts that you can apply anywhere. Number 4. Naval Ravikant, the CEO and co-founder of AngelList, has some amazing advice. He says, the first rule of conflict is don't hang around with people who are constantly engaging in conflict. People who regularly fight with others will eventually fight with you. I'm not interested in anything that's unsustainable or even hard to sustain, including difficult relationships. Number 5. Naval's best $100 or less purchase is a teppanyaki grill. Tim says to search for the Presto 22-inch electric griddle. And he says that for food, the freshness and quality of the food, going straight from the grill to your mouth, is way more important than what you do with it. Number 6, I really like what Naval had to say, so let's keep it going. When Tim asked him one of the great questions, what would you put on a billboard? Naval said, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Number 7, Naval has some amazing quotes. He says, be present above all else. Desire is suffering. Anger is a hot coal that you hold in your hand while waiting to throw it at someone else. If you can't see yourself working with someone for life, don't work with them for a day. All the real benefits in life come from compound interest. Watch every thought and always ask, why am I having this thought? All greatness comes from suffering. Love is given, not received. Enlightenment is the space between your thoughts. Mathematics is the language of nature. Every moment has to be complete in and of itself. You've only got 70 years out of the 50 billion or however long the universe is going to be around. Number 8. Here are the top 3 books for your library. You need to have these in your bookcase, and they came up as the most gifted and recommended books of all of Tim Ferriss's guests. Number 1, The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Number 2, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And number 3, Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. Speaking of which, I'll be doing a review on Sapiens coming up here shortly. As a fellow filmmaker, I can't help but to explore the Robert Rodriguez section in Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. He's an all-around creative who made movies like Sin City, but he's really known for his ultra-low-budget El Mariachi. How did he do this with no budget? This is what I was asking myself when I was a little kid even. I remember seeing this movie in the cinema down the street. Well, first he wrote down what assets he had. This is known as the Rodriguez list, and he made El Mariachi as a test film for himself, which is a great mindset to come from. Let's make a test movie. Let's make an experiment. So he writes down the assets that he has. He's like, my friend Carlo has a ranch in Mexico, and his cousin owns a bar, so let's make the shootout in the bar, and we'll see the bad guy at the ranch. Even though it only cost $7,000 to make, he tried to make it seem more expensive so he could tell people that he spent $70,000 on the movie. Tim then adds that excuses are a dime a dozen. The I don't have list. I don't have funding or connections is a popular write-off for inaction, but lack of resources is often a critical ingredient. It makes you use every dollar very carefully. Rodriguez says that the camera was so loud that you couldn't shoot sound at the same time. So he would shoot a take, put the camera away, get the sound out, put the mic up close. So he got great sound, but it was out of sync. He said that we all kind of talk in our own rhythm. So he says, if I say my name is Robert, you put the camera away and now you do the audio. Hi, my name is Robert. You can pretty much get it to sync. When it started to get out of sync, he would cut to the dog or do a close-up, which created a really snappy, quick editing style. But it was really just to get it back in sync. So he says not enough money and not enough time forces one to be creative. Sometimes art needs to be imperfect. Robert then says, even if I didn't sell mariachi, I would have learned so much by doing that project. I mean, that was the idea. I'm there to learn. I'm not there to win. I'm there to learn because then I'll win eventually. You've got to be able to look at your failures and know that there's a key to success in every failure. Francis Ford Coppola said once that failure isn't durable. And Robert backs this up by saying that that is correct because you can go back and you can look at it and you can go, oh, no, that wasn't a failure. That was a key moment of my development that I needed to take, and I can trust my instinct. I really can. Notes at midnight. Robert sets an alarm for midnight every night to input his day's notes. He takes lots of notes. Around midnight usually is a good time, he says, and I'll usually write something down because I found that even when I just wrote some items down, I could go back and fill them in later because I would remember. And what kept it going is when I would go back and review the journals and realize how many life-changing things happened within a weekend. He says if you're a parent, this is a must because you need to remember when on May 12th, 1999, we went camping and we saw that bear creature bison thing, and then you can relive it by going over the journals. Wow, it actually came out the water at us. Robert doesn't seem to view creativity as job specific. He routinely plays guitar on set and invites master painters to set to teach the actors during the breaks. The technical part of any job is 10%, he says. 90% is creativity. If you already know how to be creative, you've kind of got the battle half beat because you don't need to know. You don't need to know what note specifically you're going to play when you get on stage and you do your solo. Ask any of the greats, he says. What did I just play? And Jimmy Vaughn will say, I don't know. Robert says, you get in your own way thinking that you needed to know something, a trick or a process before it would flow. So get the I out of the way and let it flow, he says. So when an actor says, I'm not sure how I'm going to play this part, then that's great. It's like half is knowing and half is not knowing and trusting it will be there. Robert says the most important thing is just to begin. Don't just sit there and try and visualize it staring up at the ceiling full form because it's never going to come. Some people think, well, I don't have an idea so I can't start, but he says you have to act first before the inspiration will hit. You don't wait for inspiration and then act, or you're never going to act because you're never going to have inspiration. Not consistently. He learned this while drawing comic strips, and I just think that that's interesting that a lot of directors started off drawing comic strips, in animation. Finally, Rodriguez says he just doesn't do just filmmaking. He's a musician, a painter, editor, a composer, all these things, but he classifies this as one thing. He says, I live a creative life. The book Robert most often gives to people is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And this is how he applies pitching his movies to actors. He's like, I shoot really fast, you're only going to be there 4 days, it'll be the most fun that you've ever had, and you'll probably get great reviews. Your performance is going to be really free because I'm going to give you that freedom. Do what you want. I'm an indie filmmaker, which means we all kind of do multiple jobs, so I get away with it. Do you want to come make this movie? And they're like, yes, it's no stress. It's really fun. Robert is of the philosophy that everything happens for a reason. Everything has a purpose. So you never have to be upset over anything. If something doesn't go according to plan, say, what can I learn from this? Because it might be for a reason. On today's episode, we look at Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. It's a collection of his life's recipes, meaning he's one of those dudes who records every workout and is constantly figuring out how to improve. And now he's letting us in on his secret world. Take all those ideas that he's been working on ever since he was a kid, this compendium, this magnificent collection of ideas, and throwing it all into this super toolkit. And that's how it's to be read. You just flip through it, you flip through this book, get good ideas, and here we see in the book that Ferriss is talking with some of the best minds in the world, and they have a lot of ideas. So I'm going to tell you what I think are some of the best top 15 ideas in the first portion of this book. I have the book right in front of me now. Part 1 is healthy. Part 2 is wealthy, and part 3 is wise. And so we're mostly going to be focusing on the healthy section. Number 1, Peter Thiel, the billionaire, likes to ask himself and others, if you have a 10-year plan of how to get somewhere, you should ask, why can't you do this in 6 months? For purposes of illustration, Tim rewords this to, what might you do to accomplish your 10-year goals in the next 6 months if you had a gun against your head? That kind of changes everything, doesn't it? What would you do to accomplish your 10-year goals in the next 6 months if you had a gun against your head? Number 2, patterns of the successful. 80% of the successful have some form of daily mindfulness or meditation practice. It's what I do. It's one of the first things I do when I wake up. Also, many of the males, the successful males, don't eat breakfast, and many successful types like to use the chili pad device for cooling at bedtime. The chili pad. Have you ever heard of this? I'm guessing it's some type of waterbed blanket where you can adjust the temperature. It's exactly what I need because our room gets so hot in the middle of the night. So I went on Amazon and I looked it up and I was so excited until I saw the price tag. $1,100. I'm not kidding you. Timothy Ferriss didn't mention that in his book. Many successful types listen to single songs on repeat for focus. I don't know if you've ever done that. Number 3, playing with temperatures. Cyclist David Zabriskie, 7-time U.S. National Time Trial Championship winner, considers the sauna a more practical replacement for high-altitude simulation tents. Think 32% more endurance by using that sauna, says Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She also says it can increase growth hormone levels as well by going 4 times per week, typically at roughly 160 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. More precisely, 2 20-minute sauna sessions at 176 degrees Fahrenheit, separated by a 30-minute cooling period, elevated growth hormone levels twofold over baseline. And these effects persist for a couple of hours post-sauna. You hear about some people doing this. I think some of my relatives might do this, but I'm not sure. Sylvester Stallone, part of the reason he looks so young, growth hormones. Timothy Ferriss drinks ice water and takes ice baths afterwards, speaking of temperatures. But obviously he's aiming at the inflammation in the esophagus we males can, get. So that's something that we males in particular have to look out for. Cancer, throat cancer, Think about Michael Douglas, and we all know how he got his throat cancer. So here I am. I'm just rummaging around the wrenches. Amelia Boone, a 3-time finisher of the death race, amongst other things. Love to meet her, I can't imagine. She loves doing training runs in the rain and cold, as she knows her competition is probably opting out. This is an example of rehearsing the worst case scenarios to become more resilient. There's a whole section on Wim Hof in this book as well too. And I'm really into Wim Hof as well. If you haven't seen my video, make sure to check out I was just down in San Francisco at a Wim Hof conference. Anyway, he's known as the Iceman, the guy who does the underwater ice submersion. So he has a great 10-day course that will change your life if you want to go in that direction as well too. Number 4, male gymnasts don't have the biceps the size of their waists from curls. This bulk comes largely from straight arm work, especially Maltese work on the rings. So check out the ring thing at Power Monkey Fitness or generic Dream Machine. I need to get these rings to bulk up my biceps. I don't care if it looks weird to go to gymnastics class, okay? Number 5, page 22 goes over the ketogenic diet, which is a high-fat diet that mimics fasting physiology. This is the diet where your brain and body begin to use ketones for energy instead of blood sugar to arrive at a state called ketosis. This is achieved through fasting, diet, ketones, or a combination. So how do you know that you're in ketosis? Well, Tim says the most reliable way to find out if you're in ketosis is to use a device called the Precision Extra by Abbott. This can measure both glucose and blood levels. And once you reach 0.5 millimolars, you can consider yourself lightly in ketosis. There's another doctor in the book, Dr. Peter Attia, who wears a Dexcom G5 continuous glucose monitor to track his glucose levels 24/7, which are displayed on his iPhone. So I'm noticing a theme here where a lot of these guys are obsessed with their insulin and glucose levels. I mean, you want to talk about adapting to the new age or new technology? It's hard to adapt when people are monitoring their glucose 24/7. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just taking my blood. I'll just be here in the corner. But Timothy says he tends to feel increased mental clarity. Why consider ketosis or supplemental ketones? Anti-cancer effects, better use of oxygen, anti-inflammatory effects. And I'm sorry guys, I'm not gonna spend the whole time on ketones. It just, to me, this is so fascinating. And it's a great intro into the ketogenic diet. It's a whole world that really might save your life, and you can simply do this by, getting one of these powders that are in this book, Tools of Titans, that they list. Number 6, fasting. Dr. Dominic Dom D'Agostino says if you don't have any cancer and you do a therapeutic fast 1 to 3 times per year, you could purge any precancerous cells that might be living in your body. If you ever know anybody that has cancer, I'll just throw this out there, because Dom says that in the book that he says fasting essentially slows or sometimes stops rapidly dividing cells and triggers an energetic crisis that makes cancer cells selectively vulnerable to chemo and radiation. So there are many studies to support this claim with fasting. Go to number 8. Charles Poliquin, one of the best known strength coaches in the world, says, "The most important thing I've learned about nutrition is you need to deserve your carbs." Man, let's deserve it. I eat a lot of pumpkin pie at Christmas. They gave me so much pumpkin pie. I'm like, shouldn't you put that on plate? And they're like, no, just eat it right out of the container. Here's a tub of ice cream. So Charles, the strength coach, says that you need to be sub 10% fat. Put another way, you have to be able to see all your abs. So you have to have penis skin on your abs. He actually said that, penis skin. And on that note, man, it's also important you wake up with a boner, says Kelly Starrett, one of the best performance coaches in the world. In the book, they say this isn't me. Apparently, the boner is an excellent indicator of sleep quality, hormonal health, circadian rhythm, timings, and that sort of thing. Number 9, for back pain, check out the Naoya acupressure mat. This rollout needle mat performs miracles for back pain. Just pull it out of your gym bag. That's where Timothy keeps his. Number 10, visual overwriting. Jane McGonigal. Did you see that great talk on TED about reality and why video games are cool and can educate and that kind of thing? She says 10 minutes of Tetris before going to bed can crowd out anything, replaying or looping in one's mind that will inhibit sleep. My wife is literally doing this right now in our living room. She's playing Tetris. Apparently, it's not really helping her with her sleep. She says, I don't know, but she's addicted and sees colors and shapes. Number 11, morning routines. As soon as you wake up, make your bed because that makes you feel like you accomplished something. Yeah, after reading this book, I'm making my bed every day. I didn't used to do that. I used to just get up. But the people in this book, they're doing these special things. They make their bed, meditate, that's something I do too, and do 10 to 15 reps of something. I have weights sitting right outside my bedroom, and I just, boom, 10 to 15. It's not meant to build muscles, it's just meant to get the blood going. And one of those mini trampolines, just prime yourself. Remember, Tony Robbins jumps in his cold bath. I jump in the cold shower if I can, and maybe do some Wim Hof exercises. Also, check out the morning pages by Julia Cameron. Julia Cameron has a book called The Artist's Way, and the morning pages are in there. And it's basically where you just write 3 pages. Stream of consciousness, just keep the pen moving. 12, meditation master Shinzen Jung said that if he were allowed to teach only one focus technique and none other, it would be this one. It's just called Just Note Gone. This is where we train the mind to notice that something previously experienced is no more. For example, at the end of a breath, notice that the breath is over. Gone. As a sound fades away, notice when it's over. Gone. When this YouTube video is done, just notice it. Gone. 13. Meditate on other people you want to be happy can help you to be more happy and get you out of the normal meditation, which is usually a very me-focused activity where you're thinking about your stuff, but think about other people, wishing them happiness. And doing this seems to resolve at least 90% of the mental chatter, Tim Ferriss says. Thank you so much for joining me today, and feel free to share this video with any of your friends. This book is so interesting. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and thumbs up button if you haven't already. Meanwhile, have a fantastic week. I'll see you next Friday. It was great, as always. Today we're looking at this week's top ideas and tools of Titans from the Why section. We're just going to keep running down the ideas and concepts, and as you can tell, I really like this book, Tools of Titans. In fact, it's my favorite of the year, as I keep saying. Number 1, you can tell the true character of a man by how his dog and his kids react to him. Shay Carl of Shaytards and co-founder of Maker Studios. Sam Harris, author and host of the podcast Waking Up with Sam Harris, wrote in his essay, Drugs and the Meaning of Life. If she, my daughter, does not try psychedelic like psilocybin or LSD at least once in her adult life, I will worry that she may have missed one of the most important rites of passage a human being can experience. A life without drugs is neither foreseeable nor, I think, desirable. Number 3, Sam also said something which has been sticking with me. He says, the sense of being a self, riding around in your head, this feeling that everyone calls I, is an illusion. It can be disconfirmed in a variety of ways. It's vulnerable to inquiry, and that inquiry can take many forms. This weekend I was at home, and I don't really get along with my brother. And in fact, we hadn't talked for almost a year, and I don't know if you have a difficult relative or someone who appears to be a difficult relative. and I was so nervous. But when I saw him, I thought about the quote, "Hi, bro. Hi, man. Is it just me, or are we dressed exactly the same?" And everything went great. But part of the reason everything went so great was because I thought of Sam Harris's quote. And suddenly I thought about how small we are. And in fact, like he says that this feeling that everyone calls eyes an illusion, I thought that in my head. And I separated myself. And I saw the situation playing out, disconnected from myself. And I saw us as patterns in the universe. These beautiful patterns like flames flickering on the planet Earth. And that these interactions were not me. Literally not me. Because I would go on autopilot and my subconscious would take over. And his subconscious would take over, and I could just literally kind of watch from afar, and I never had that experience before. Number 4, Tim has this quote on his coffee table on a piece of driftwood. It says, "Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." Anais Nin. Number 5, Malcolm's the author of The Tipping Point and Outliers, if you recall. His father, the mathematician, taught Malcolm how to ask questions upon questions. My father has zero intellectual insecurities. It has never crossed his mind to be concerned that the whole world thinks he's an idiot. He's not in that game, okay? So if he doesn't understand something, he just asks you, and he doesn't care if he sounds foolish. He'll ask the most obvious questions without any sort of concern about it. So he asks a lot of dumb, in the best sense of that word, questions. He'll say to someone,
"I don't understand."
"Explain that to me." He'll just keep asking questions until he gets it right. And I grew up listening to him do this in every conceivable setting. If my father had met Bernie Madoff, the Ponzi scheme guy, he never would have invested money with him because he would have said,
"I don't understand how that works."
Number 6, sit, walk, don't wobble. Kevin Kelly, co-founder of Wired magazine, says you shouldn't multitask. When he's with a person, that's his total priority. He's given his total priority to this. Don't you hate those people who, as you're talking to them, get on their phone and actually start another conversation? If Kevin goes to a play or a movie, he's at that play or movie, and he's in 100% and he's going to listen. Number 7, the death countdown clock. Kevin says he actually has a countdown clock. He says, "I actually took the actuarial tables for the estimated age of my death for someone born when I was born, and I worked back the number of days, and I have that showing on my computer. How many days? I tell you, nothing concentrates your time like knowing how many days you have left. Now, of course, I'm likely to live longer than that. I'm in good health, etc. But nonetheless, I have 6,000 something days, and it's not very many days to do all the things that I want to do." Kevin then says a friend told him he organizes his remaining days around 5-year increments because any idea that's significant, that's worth doing, will last about 5 years. Number 8, comedian Whitney Cummings says, in order for art to imitate life, you have to have a life. Start with "I love you." Whitney also says that her trauma therapist said, every time you meet someone, just in your head say, "I love you," before you have the conversation with them, and that conversation is going to get better. Thank you so much for joining me today, and feel free to share this video with any of your friends. This book is so interesting. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and thumbs up button if you haven't already. Meanwhile, have a fantastic week. I'll see you next Friday. It was great, as always.